The reading today is from the book of Luke, chapter 21, verses 25 through 36. May we open our hearts to the reading of these words. There will be signs in the sun, the moon, and the stars, and on the earth distress among the nations, confused by the roaring of the sea and the waves. People will faint from fear and foreboding of what's coming upon the world, for the powers of the heavens will be shaken. Then they will see the Son of Man coming in a cloud, with power and great glory. Now, when these things begin to take place, stand up and raise your heads, because your redemption is drawing near. Then he told them a parable. Look at the fig tree and all of the trees. As soon as they sprout leaves, you can see for yourselves and know what summer is already near. So also, when you see these things taking place, you know that the kingdom of God is near. Truly, I tell you, this generation will not pass away until all things have taken place. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will not pass away. Be on guard so that your hearts are not weighed down with dispassion and drunkenness and the worries of this life, and that day catch you unexpectedly like a trap, for it will come upon all who live on the face of the whole earth. Be alert at all times, praying that you will have the strength to escape all of these things that will take place and to stand before the Son of Man. May we be granted wisdom and courage for interpretation.
So it's Advent. We get to change colors. I get to wear my very favorite stole. And we get to do all the sorts of things that we do as we prepare for Christmas. And we light a candle for the darkness of night, and we reflect on what it means for a Messiah to come into the world. And then we get all this talk about destruction and fear and vigilance. But Advent always begins with an ending. And each year, the scriptures have an apocalyptic bent that certainly doesn't fit into the fa la 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 la. But that's the way of Advent. That's it. Now, I don't know about you, but I've heard many a sermon about keeping watch and being vigilant. And because it says right so in the Bible that we have to be if we want to be able to stand before the Almighty. And they're terrifying. But I don't buy into the terrifying. I don't think that scaring somebody into a belief is a particularly sound way of working in the world. People go to therapy for that. And this apocalyptic writing, and when I heard those kinds of sermons, it scared the willies out of me because I knew for a fact that I never sat around just waiting for Jesus. And I never thought about all of the institutions of the world breaking down, let alone the stars falling and waves engulfing me until I heard one of these sermons. And so instead of informing me about anything that seems hope-filled, it just frightened me. And then I met Lloyd Bailey at Duke Divinity School, who always said, the Bible speaks for itself if you just let it. And people didn't write for us. The people who wrote the Bible, the books in the Bible, they didn't write for us, these unknown people thousands of years in the future. And these people didn't write because they were fortune tellers. People wrote because there was a message bigger than they were, a message that could transform at any moment if we just open our eyes. It's a mistake to think that Christianity or the church is personal, just Jesus and me. A lot of Christian music supports this notion. It's I, it's me, it's mine. Or people say, I go to church to get X, Y, or Z. Now, personal growth, friendships, and healing, those may be byproducts of belonging to the church. But the church isn't here to be a fraternal organization or a social service agency or a psychological health center or any kind of social group. The church and your community is here to prepare for cosmic shakings. In teaching A Stone to Talk, Annie Dillard recognized this when she wrote, "On the whole, I do not find Christians outside of the catacombs sufficiently sensible of conditions. Does anyone have the foggiest idea what sort of power we so blithely invoke? Or, as I suspect, does no one really believe a word of it? The churches are children playing on the floor with their chemistry sets, mixing up a batch of TNT to kill a Sunday morning. It's madness to wear ladies' straw hats and velvet hats to church. We should all be wearing crash helmets. Ushers should issue life preservers and signal flares. They should lash us to our pews, for the sleeping God may wake someday and take offense, or the waking God may draw us out to where we can never return." I believe we follow in the way of a waking God, a God who keeps working with the world, bringing something out of nothing, light out of darkness and form out of chaos, birthing a new you, a new me, a new world out of the old. But that's the way of Advent. Something must end for something to begin. Courageous ministry doesn't cling to the past or to the way we've always done things or to buildings or beloved donations. I can name several churches right here in Austin that are filled with a few lovely people who refuse to see the way of God in their lives, who will not let God enter into their own ways, and so they do not change. They refuse to be open and affirming of people who are different than they, or who, because they have an endowment, they cling to a gorgeous building, resisting the destructive, creative power of God because they don't want to change. And they watch their numbers dwindle and their opportunities to serve shrink while they sit certain in their ways. Advent is a time when we wait for the mystery of God. We wait as we walk in the way of Christ. We wait knowing God is not done with us, with the world, with all of creation. And this is difficult to do. This week we wait in hope, in eager expectancy. Hope of God's intervening power is difficult to maintain when faced with personal crisis. Eager expectancy of God's intervening power is difficult to maintain when the church allows and covers up abuse. Eager expectancy of God's intervening power is difficult to maintain while our own state offers a 1,400-acre parcel of land to build an internment camp. Eager expectancy of God's intervening power is difficult to maintain when it doesn't seem we are listening to scientists about the impact of rapid climate change and the buildup of atmospheric carbon. But Jesus commands us to stay alert, to be ready, to be the servants tending the farm while the owner is away. Now, eager expectancy is not certitude. Eager expectancy is looking at the situation and living in faith. There was a woman in hospice care, and she was riddled with tumors, yet she believed that she would be healed. Each day, when a hospice employee came to her house, she was sitting on a chaise lounge, and it was a chair that provided comfort for her because the tumors were all over and made it difficult for her to breathe. and she was dressed for fancy company, complete with makeup, and she always had tea and cookies out, ready to serve. We were guests, not just healthcare workers. Now, people from her church visited regularly. They built a special chaise for her in her sanctuary so that she could attend and sit comfortably and breathe. Well, the nurses were very disturbed, and they insisted that I needed to talk some sense into her and her husband. They were worried that when she died, he would be devastated due to his unrealistic expectations of her getting better. I pointed out that she was in hospice care. They knew what hospice care was. They recognized her declining condition and had even, provided furniture to help deal with it. But they were convinced that his faith was a flimsy foundation. And I was convinced after meeting them and learning about their Pentecostal faith that the last thing I needed to do was to disrupt their eager expectancy. And she did die. I went to visit her husband, and he was sad, but he was comforted by his wife's courage and the witness that she had been to others, how she continued to offer graceful hospitality up until a couple of days before her last breath. He said to me, "I prayed for God to heal her so I could have her longer. Instead, God stepped in and relieved her of her suffering. It's up to me now to bear the same witness, the same hospitality, the same grace that she did." In 2020, when all the downtown stores and soup kitchens were closed due to COVID, the unhoused were left with few options for food. Several of the downtown churches worked together to make sack lunches. And we brought them to another downtown central church where they were distributed throughout the week. Now, one of my members of the congregation was skeptical about COVID-19 and even more so about all the lockdowns. And he asked me if we really should be involved in preparing these lunches, because after all, this was no way to solve the crisis of homelessness in Austin. And I agreed with him. This is absolutely no way to solve the crisis of homelessness in Austin. But that wasn't what we were doing. We were just feeding people who had no place to find food. Well, he grumbled and he went away. But the next week, he showed up with 500 sack lunches. And he did this until the COVID crisis sack lunch ministry ended. And I asked him what changed his mind. And he said he thought he should be something while he waited for something bigger to happen. Hope isn't passive. It's being awake. It's being ready. It's being vigilant, but not to avoid personal destruction. It's following the way even when the news is so depressing and anxiety-provoking that you just want to stay away from the news. It's following the way of Christ even when our best laid plans, our long-term relationships, and hoped-for jobs fall apart. It's following the way even when climate patterns are changing and plants are confused. Advent hope, eager expectancy, is doing something while we wait for something bigger to happen. I watched our first FIRE meeting, that's Financial Information Resource Engagement, unfold. And I saw new members and long-term members begin to name who we are, what we do, and what we need to engage our ministries. Everybody was happy. There was no depression or glum. We were all doing something while we're waiting for something bigger to happen. It's difficult to maintain eager expectancy when finances are short and buildings need repair. But we knew that United Christian is called to be a courageous and life-affirming ministry, corporately and individually. And we shouldn't let something silly like a lack of money stop us from doing something while we wait for God to intervene. So we began our work eagerly, expecting God to show a way, all the while knowing that it may be a way that is known just as easily as it may be a way that is marked with roaring seas and shaking heavens. For God's ways are great. God's ways dismantle the old, the decrepit, the broken, to make way for new life. And on this first Sunday of Advent, we live in hope, doing the things that hopeful people do, living as the servants left to do the work while the owner of the farm is away. For even while there is disease and famine, hatred and war, there are crops to harvest. We must not be dismayed by the ways of the world. A new world is coming. A new world is coming with us, and we may see it if we keep our ears and eyes open. Amen.